All right, all right, all right. Welcome to another edition of Shabbat Lounge. This is Matt.
And Jake here.
And we are joined today by a special guest. And we are joined today with Sister Joy Brock.
Hello.
Yep. And why don't you tell us how you met Joy?
Well, I found Joy's content on TikTok. And she also has a blog post in a blog called Afflicted for Messiah. She's got YouTube and Twitter, but I mostly started with TikTok videos, like we do these days.
Like
Jake.
the kids do these days, right?
So, like my squirrel attention span does.
It's perfect for you.
It is perfect. It's a match made in heaven. So
yeah.
I can watch thousands of little sound bites, and I don't have to sit and watch an hour-long video.
Right.
So
It's
anyway,
perfect.
So I stumbled across her in TikTok and found her insightful and just thought she'd be a good person to introduce our audience to and let them know about her. And we just wanted to take a few minutes and kind of learn more about her and find out about her background.
Yeah, perfect. So, Joy, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Well, and so Joy, I had some questions, and we're going to start with that, if that's fine with you.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I was curious about is, about how long have you been on this Torah walk?
I have been on this walk almost 2 years, so not very long. Since October, I want to say like 2021.
Yeah.
Around in there. Mm-hmm.
Well, just from judging by your content that you've put out, you have a pretty good grasp of a lot of things. So in 2 years, you've picked up a lot of things. So you've had lots of time, or you've invested a lot of time to study.
Yes, that is true. I've always been a pretty avid studier. But when October 21 happened, you can go from reading the Bible a lot and thinking you have a really good grasp on it until you actually start getting into the Greek and the Hebrew. And then you're like, wow, okay, I don't know anything at all.
Yeah.
So that kind of propelled me into going into greater depths like that. And it's been a real adventure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, can you briefly describe, kind of where you came from? How did you go from point A to point B, and what's your journey been like?
Sure. Well, when COVID hit, I think that for a lot of people, there was a big shift, I guess you could say, when it comes to like religion. And I was in a non-denominational church that I had been in for about 4 years, and it was a very, very small church, like 5 family, small, very small. And we were very tight, very close knit. And when COVID happened and the majority of the churches closed, we stayed open, and it was a wonderful thing. I was very thankful for that. We did the social distancing thing, but throughout that year of COVID, our church kind of exploded because people didn't have anywhere to go. So there was a lot of little nuances to that about whether it was right to have so many people come to us when they really should have been trying to be more involved with the elders of their church to say, hey, we're not good with this, instead of just going to a different church, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I struggled a lot during that time, throughout that year, because at the end of that year, I really started to question how the God of the Bible was okay with churches being shut down for a year and nothing happening. And for me, knowing what the Old Testament says about what happened to people when they weren't worshiping him in the way he said, things did not go well. So that was kind of an eye-opening thing for me to think, wow, nothing has happened. We're not corporately worshiping, I guess, as a whole collectively in America. So I started to ask, like, who is this God? And it's interesting because like I had been, I felt a strong Christian for 26 years. And here I am being like, who is this God that we're worshiping? And he is okay with this. So that once I got to a place of really humbling myself because I knew something was up, I started seeing the name. I started seeing the Yud Hey Vav Hey. I started seeing Yahweh. I started seeing Yahuwah, and it was amazing because it was like Yah was starting to show me things. And in the fall, there was a lot of things that was going on in my life personally. We were moving our house. It was like I don't want to say a dream house, but it was like my forever house. But due to circumstances involved in that, we moved, and I was going through this. I hate to call it an awakening, but like I was starting to like study the Greek, study the Hebrew. I was learning the name. I was going through this head covering thing, and I think a lot of people in my church thought I was having a nervous breakdown because I was having such a hard time with the name Jesus and Sunday worship. I was starting to discover the Sabbath, and I was talking to the elders of my church about this, and they were very agreeable, but there was always a but. And it got to the point where I just couldn't be there anymore. And that was really hard. It was really, really hard. And so with me not being able to really go anywhere, it just obviously I was, when we're down, we're going to find our comfort in the scriptures. And it really did propel me more into the scriptures, which was a blessing, huge blessing, but it came at such a big cost. And that's when more and more information was coming in based off of, like I said, studying the Hebrew and the Greek. Um, so fast forward, I think, into the spring of 2022, I had my best friend who was Torah observant, and I didn't really know so much about the whole sacred name movement thing, but I knew that she went to an assembly that gathered on the Sabbath, and I called her up and I was like, "You have to take me to your church," because I had visited her a few years prior for tabernacles, and I didn't realize it at the time that they only used the names and everything like that, because that was becoming more important to me as I was studying the third commandment. And so I went to the assembly, and I absolutely I knew it was where I really needed to be. And so that's how I came to my assembly.
So that's the same assembly you go to now, then?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah, that's a powerful story about that church shut down. That's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because that was a very unique time in history, and thinking people, it was weird to look
Yeah.
at churches, and churches just all of a sudden changed everything they were doing,
Yes.
and money went down. And really a lot of that never came back for some
Right.
churches,
It
and
didn't.
some churches just don't exist anymore after
Right.
that.
Right.
And it is a good question to ask, where is God in that? And
Exactly.
I don't think he had any problem with those churches being shut down. He's like, okay,
Didn't appear
and
that way.
that's right. And there was a time when that would be a hard thing for me to wrap my head around and understand. But that's
Yeah.
interesting that drove you to this.
Yeah, it's kind of a sifting. And that's where Yah is, and it's a sifting of, okay, if you're really serious, you'll go in hardship, or if it's good,
Yeah.
it's in sickness and in health, right? It's
Yeah.
if you're married to him, you'll be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting, the way that turned out, and it is. I liked what you said about your perspective on how all these people came to your church because it was still open, and it's like, why aren't you keeping your church open? If you're so
Right.
interested in keeping the church open, why aren't you talking to your leadership
Yes.
and getting it open? And I think there's a big dearth of interest in that these days because I think we're addicted to comfort, and to do that would be uncomfortable. So
yes, absolutely.
we just go where it's easy, and your place was open, so people just go there.
Yeah. Very true. They've grown to the point where they're no longer in that building. They're in a much bigger building. And to be fair, I had told them, I said, because I was looking for small, I really wanted that small church. I told them, I was like, you guys ever move into a bigger building? I was in a bigger church before, and I really like that closeness of doing life with people. And so I don't know. I don't know if it was just the way Yah orchestrated all of those things, and I wasn't really never meant to be there. I don't know. So
Yeah, no, that's an interesting story, and you kind of started talking about it a little bit. So you started going with your best friend to a Torah fellowship. Can you kind of talk about what does that look like for you? Because for us, we do like a house church thing. What do you guys do?
So we have a building. It actually started out as a very small schoolhouse, I think like 100 years ago. This building has been around a very long time.
It's awesome.
And it's really wonderful. And it started as a schoolhouse, and then they tacked on a side portion that is now like where there's rows of tables where we eat our food. And then that happened. And then they put on a much bigger addition onto that. That's actually like the sanctuary part of it. And it sits on 80 acres, and they raise cattle there, and they have a big garden, and they have little houses on the land that people come from all over to Sukkot in. And they have places for buses and tents and all of those things. And it's a really wonderful place, and we are so in love with it. And it's interesting because I haven't touched on this yet, but about my husband, real quick, we've been together long time, like 30 years, and for 26 of those years, I was always the one that was dragging everybody to church. And at year 26, I was done dragging everybody to church, like so done. So the entire 4 years I was at the non-denominational church, I never ever asked anybody to come with me ever. And I'm so thankful that I didn't, because I know that if my husband did come in there, I know that me leaving probably would have been way more problematic. And so I'm so thankful. That's such a huge blessing. So when I came into this walk, my husband came in at the same time, and I can't describe to you what a miracle that really is. And when people talk about miracles and assembly, and we're talking, I'm like, you don't even understand what a miracle it is that I'm here and my husband is here with me. It's so amazing. It feels surreal most days that, or on our Sabbaths, my husband is like, when are we going? And what are we doing? And I don't even have words, honestly. So when he came, after I came with my best friend and talked to him about it, he was a little nervous. He thought it was going to be in a rundown shack in the middle of nowhere for some weird reason. I don't know why.
That's my jam. I was hoping for a broke down shack in the middle.
Right. So when I brought him there, and it was like the first time when we left, he was like, he goes, I really like this. Like when he met the pastor, it was just like, I hate to say this, like it, but it was like they fell in love. I don't know. He had a son named Brian, and my husband's name is Brian, and Brian took the pastor, and pastor took to my husband. And my husband has always been one to be throughout his life very distrustful of churches and pastors. We do have a little bit of a similar background growing up, where I was more obviously into it. He was not. He was. We both have fundamental Baptist backgrounds, but he didn't really want much to do with it. And so he really loves the assembly as much as I do, and we're very thankful for it.
Yeah, that's a tremendous blessing to come along together. And and I think that's advice that I would give anybody. We recently were with a young fellowship that's just beginning, and that's one of the things we talked about was try to grow in it together. Don't
Hmm.
you may have to slow down a little bit if there's somebody like wanting to run off and go crazy, but maybe if you just slow down a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe you can let some other people go with you. Just and I think that's important, and
Yeah.
you probably can testify to um, saying the right things at the right time and not nagging people and not,
Yes.
and that's pretty easy to do, because you get excited about this and you become the Torah terrorist, if you will. And, you kind of have to back off a little bit, or you'll
Yes.
say you'll do everything
Wrong,
that
basically.
pushes them away. And sometimes if you're not careful, you'll burn bridges with
Yeah.
relationships that you really can't burn a bridge with your sister and your mom and your
Yeah.
dad. I mean, but people have done it, and
Yeah.
and it's not worth. Yes, we may not agree, but don't burn these bridges over this.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But that's great. And then the other question I have is, kind of where do you see yourself in the future? As you're talking, I'm kind of showing I showed the YouTube, and now I'm showing the Twitter, or X, as they say.
They
Used to
say it.
say.
They say it. I don't say it.
So kind of what are your future plans? I know one of the things that you talked about was this Ingham County Torah Keepers, and you wanted to talk about that. So before you talk about your future plans, maybe tell us about this. What I don't even know what Ingham is. It Ingham?
Ingham.
Ingham.
Yeah.
So,
The G is kind of silent. Yep.
okay.
So yeah, I wanted to start something local in Ingham County. If there was anybody that maybe was local to me that was, looking for fellowship or not really sure where to go, I know that there is a Michigan Torah group that a lot of people go to, and I see it all the time. Hey, we're looking for a place to assemble. We're looking for a place to go to tabernacles, and so they do use that resource on Facebook, and so I do watch that page. And so if anybody is local to me, I haven't had it yet. I haven't had anybody really local yet, but it's there, and I do post on their tour portions, and I haven't in a while, but yeah.
Yeah. So the question I have, you mentioned something that was intriguing, and I think other people listening to this might be intrigued as well. This your congregation that has the Sukkot gathering, is that something? Is it invite only? How would someone participate in that?
It's not, it's open to whoever wants to come. It's they don't charge any money or anything like that. They actually hire the Amish to come and cook the meals when it's not a high day.
I bet that's
And
good.
it's wonderful. They have showers there, like, and they just do a lot, and I can't really speak more high about it. It's wonderful. So anybody could contact me. The church does have a website um, that you could go to, and I guess reach out there if they wanted to.
Yeah. What is that?
It's the Assembly of Yahweh in Eaton Rapids.
Assembly of Yahweh.
In
Yes.
Eaton, Eaton?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really cool. I've heard about some things doing that, but I haven't ever heard of it up north. In Arkansas, it seems to be a real common thing. There's a lot of Torah people that moved there, and years ago, I met somebody that was trying to do that. He was trying to do, and actually now I see this has like become a business thing for people where they get other like-minded homesteaders together, and they don't necessarily, or they're not always looking for necessarily Torah people, but they buy a piece of land and everybody shares it, and
Okay.
you buy in to it. But I've known some Torah groups that kind of did that same kind of thing. But
Okay.
but that's a really neat thing. And I know a lot of people for Sukkot, they like to go someplace, and I'm sure Michigan would be nice and cool.
Yeah.
At Sukkot. You might need a jacket.
You might. I have heard that it has snowed in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's what the fire's for.
yeah.
That is true. There is a
Not
fire pit.
Yeah, not like here where sometimes it's a coat. It's in the 90s and it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
warm.
Yeah.
So
It's
that sounds pretty good.
I've heard that they have performed baptisms in the river, which isn't very far, and it's cold.
I bet. Yeah, you gotta want it.
You gotta want it.
We're gonna make this fast.
Yeah.
So so you've got a Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, a website, TikTok. I don't know if I left anything out, but kind of what do you see the future for you in this? What else? What are your plans, or have you thought about it?
Honestly, I want to be open to what Yah would have us do together. I don't know what that is. I want to be open and ready for whatever He wills. I honestly don't know what that is. I would love to do something where I'm at in my park, but I just don't know how it would happen. I'm just praying about it, and I don't know.
Like something public in the public park? Is that what
No,
you said?
in my trailer park.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Something real local, small.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or through something maybe in Lansing. There's a lady that I work with next to me. I've been talking to her a little bit, and she's open, and
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
she wants to go into a legal direction and maybe try and help the people there. Because I had asked her, I said, what do you think is something that people need in this city the most? And she said they definitely need legal help. And so I've kind of had that rolling around in my brain. I don't know how we could do something in that vein. I don't know. I'm just praying about it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know, and Moses said, "Be still and wait on Yah, and he'll make it happen."
Yes.
So
yeah.
You just gotta be ready to move when he says.
True. I also think about this too. It takes, I believe, 4 years to harvest the fruit. So maybe it's just I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe I need a little bit more time. So.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of people that rush in too soon, and it's easy to do that, and it's better to kind of wait and see.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, and I'm sure y'all will guide you in that. So that's great. I think that is basically the part I had, and now it's your turn.
All right, yay! No, so yeah, I had seen some recent videos that you had done and on TikTok, and one that kind of caught my attention is you had talked about the cross being an idol, and how if a lot of people don't recognize when they're ensnared by an idol, and so I kind of wanted to have you talk about that a little bit, and how that kind of came onto your radar, and why that was something you felt interested in talking about.
Sure. It was actually completely unintentional. I didn't plan for for what was going to come out on that. I don't know. Just this commenter had asked the question about what I thought about the cross, and in all honesty, I hadn't really thought a lot about it, other about the stake. I'm still learning about the stake. The Bible that I read from it's produced from the Assembly of Yahweh. It's called the Word of Yahweh, and they have the word stake in there. And when the video, it wasn't planned at all. I hadn't really thought a lot about the cross, just that the commenter brought it up. What do you think about it? And how what I said came out wasn't planned at all. I just am learning myself about the stake, and the Bible that I read out of, which is published by my church, the word of Yahweh has the word stake in there. So I knew that there is a group of people, a large group of people that believe it was a stake and not the cross T. And so I just brought that up in the video because when you asked me about the cross, I'm going to think about the stake. And although I don't know a whole lot about it yet, that's just what came out. And when the cross is mentioned, when it comes to an idol of wood, based on what I have studied, I don't know a lot of idols made out of wood that are like statues. I don't know if that's just elementary thinking, but I think of the cross and I realize how revered it is for a lot of people as far as jewelry, and it's hanging in their house and it's on their clothing and it's just everywhere. I mean, and you see even celebrities that are spewing the most awful filth and they wear the cross, and that blows my mind. And so I think for the fact of the video, I think that we all need to consider the possible truth that it is an idol. And that's basically what I was trying to convey, was thinking about the stake, learning about that, and considering the fact that it could be or is an idol. And I know that this was a thought, I wish I would have brought it up, but thinking about what hangs on our walls, we know that Yah commanded his commandments to hang on our walls, and that is what hangs on my wall. So I would rather do what he tells us to do than to just do what I think looks good or feels good based on how I was raised and what other people think is good to do. So
Right, because then anyone would be out there just doing whatever seems right in their own minds, right?
yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, and kind of interesting, way early on for us too. My sister had brought up the cross, and she's like, "Well, what if Jesus was beheaded? Would we wear a guillotine around our necks?" It just didn't make sense to her, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty funny, and
Yeah.
we probably wouldn't, because it's just kind of morbid, but
Right, right.
and yet, we're gonna put this death implement up and revere it, basically. And I think, kind of like you said in that video, is to know when it's when someone's considering it an idol, is
Yeah.
can they take that necklace off and destroy it?
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
burn that wooden cross and not go crazy thinking you've dishonored Yah by doing
Right, right. Exactly. Or worse, or
yeah.
your eternal, your salvation's at stake. And yeah, it can go to pretty far lengths, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I was glad to hear you bring up those points about that.
Yeah.
And like you were saying about the steak, yeah, I think there are, when we came into it, we saw these different schools of thought on it, and it does make sense. Either way kind of makes sense to me,
Yeah.
because it's the ancient Tav, like Donkey Speaks talks about, or it's, even if it was just a steak and his arms are up and his feet are down, it's reminiscent of the Passover lamb over the fire
Mm-hmm.
in Egypt. So
Yeah.
there are those tie-ins that make it, I could see it either way.
Yeah. And also I also failed to bring this up too. I think there was a recent Torah portion about how they were to destroy all the pagan shrines when they
Right.
went into
Yeah.
the land. I mean, can you imagine if we went out and we're like, okay, we're going to destroy all these churches,
Right.
So yeah, that was another thought. There would be a lot of crosses destroyed in that.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good point that you bring out, that people don't ask enough. And, it's like, what scripture do we have for you? Show us a scripture where it says you're supposed to wear this cross and
Yeah.
display it. I mean, it doesn't exist, but yet,
True.
like you said, there are scriptures where he tells us to do certain things. And,
Yes.
Yeah, and when you think about it, you're
he does.
honoring the death. You're not honoring the resurrection.
Yeah.
In
Right.
that case,
Yeah. That is true.
the defeating of death is the important thing.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's just an interesting way that people tie things to it's just the way people turn things into things that aren't really meant to be. But
Right. And if it gets somebody to think, then or even consider, I always want to err on the side of caution, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to him. I want to do what he tells us to do, and I don't. Yeah, it makes me nervous to think, well, I'm just going to do this, and maybe he'll like it. I don't operate that
yeah,
way.
Yeah. No.
yeah.
No, that's good.
And then, so my next question was, I saw a few videos that you had out that were pointing to this idea of teachers, different teachers being wolves or like wolves, and so I just kind of wanted to get your idea of how would you describe or identify a wolf?
Um, I can't remember if I had commented this particular thing on the interview with Luke, leaving Churchianity, about the fact of rapaciousness. And I had looked that up in the Greek, and when Yahshua was talking about being a ravenous wolf. And when I did a deep dive on that word, the word rapacious was there, and it has to do with greed. And I know that we all have in our minds that somebody who's greedy is like, "Wahahaha." They're rubbing their hands together, and
Right.
they have a very sinister look on their face. But I think greed can come in a lot of forms. When you're doing something for money, we may not want to call it greed, but when it comes to Yah and being an under shepherd for his flock, if you're doing that for money, I can see that as greed, where other people might see it as, well, they need to support their family, and they're actually ministering, and they're going to hospitals, and they're doing all these things. And they'll even bring up Paul. Well, you don't muzzle the ox as they tread the corn, so they are entitled to something. I I have some difficulties with that because of the 6-1 pattern that Yah gave us, and we are to work 6 days and rest the one. And when you talk to the pastor of our assembly, and you bring up anything of what he has or whatever is there at the church, he he's very quick to tell you, "Oh, I paid for that." Like everything he does, because he's very he's retired now, but he loved the fact that Yah always gave him a job. He always had a job, and he worked those 6 days and rested on the Sabbath. And he did it his whole life, and that is what is so incredible. He was never in any type of paganity, never did the Christmas, Easter, never did anything like that. And he's been in it his whole life. And I think that's just so wonderful. And to be able to support his family and never live off of the tithes of people that come to your congregation. And growing up all my life, I grew in the church I grew up with. It was very tithe oriented, and there was people that just didn't have a lot of money. Like I was one of them. Like we didn't have a lot of money, but you were always guilted into giving the first of what you had. And it makes me sad looking back on that a lot of people um, are guilted into doing those things, so they do it for the wrong reasons. And so when you have a pastor that lives off of the tithes of the people, and it's not biblical at all, that to me is greed. And I know that I'm sure, a lot of people that would completely disagree with me, but that is how I see it. Is that, to me, it is the greed that comes from that rapacious part of a
Yeah.
wolf.
Yeah, and I do remember you commenting that, and you did bring that up on that live stream. And so I'm glad you went into detail on that. And yeah, it's something Matt and I like to say on this channel is pastor always gets paid. So
Right,
um,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting too that um
And if you look at it, it's the opposite of Yah's pattern of 6-1. They don't work the 6, but they work the 1, if that makes sense. So Sunday is their technical job of coming in and working that one day. But, that's hard to tell. That's hard for people to hear.
Right. Whereas like an actual priest worked 7 days a week,
Yeah.
right? Because Yeshua says, he talks about how, well, the priest works on Sabbath,
Yeah.
violating the Sabbath law, and
Hmm.
he's actually, you know, making a point to the Pharisees. He's not saying that they actually break the Torah by working on the Sabbath. They're directed to by Torah.
Yeah.
So, but the point he makes is, yeah, they're working, so I can work.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
the type of work he's doing is work for the kingdom.
Yes.
And
The
so
type of work. Yes.
exactly.
Yeah. For
Um,
sure.
so yeah, I think that's pretty interesting.
Controversial for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what you're saying about greed, it can even be with people. I've seen people that were greedy about hanging on to other people like possessions, and there are some people that kind of go through life collecting people,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
and especially people in like the church world, but yeah, I've seen people do that with weirdly with people. I don't know if you've ever seen that,
Mm.
but
Like in terms
Mm.
of like how many people are in their
like their
pews or their
circle.
friend
It
circle.
could be people. It could be actual numbers of people butts in the seat, but also just like friend circle. They'll accumulate a lot of people around them, and be kind of possessive of that a little bit. So I
Mm.
don't know.
That's
It's
interesting.
because
I
I'm
haven't thought
old.
of
I've
that.
seen a lot of stuff.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not even touching on mega churches. Like that is
Yeah.
not, yeah. I'm just, your basic, ordinary, everyday place.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So this one could lead into some conversation. We'll see. One of your videos that we had discussed was this conversation format of a back and forth between you and a friend, and then it was actually a dream you had or that you're kind of trying to describe, and but in general, because I know this happened with me, happens with Matt, but we get into conversations, especially early on, with people about what it is you're doing and why you're different all of a sudden, and
Hmm.
um, now you're this peculiar person for some reason, and rocking the boat.
A
And
person who's gone crazy.
yeah,
That's.
quit rocking the boat. So, I'm just curious if you have any conversations that kind of stick out, where maybe you brought something up that someone else hadn't thought about and kind of moved them a little bit, or just seeds you've planted, or things that maybe others have brought up that maybe you hadn't thought about that were kind of new to you. Anything like that stick out?
Um, I will say that up until pretty recently, I was fairly quiet about what I would say to certain people. And that conversation, that was in the dream, was talking to people that I used to go to church with. I had actually seen them in real life. When driving through town, they were stopped and getting ice cream, and I said, "Oh, I know those people," and
Yeah.
that's when I had that dream. And what I would say to them, and they were asking me why I was different, and I was explaining that. And I dream quite often about what I would say to them now versus what I said to them when I left, which
Right.
now is completely different. But on a different note, a conversation that does come into mind is the a girl that I work with. She claims to be a believer, and I had mentioned, see, this is our second year doing the feasts, and the first year I didn't really say a lot about it because we were new, and I didn't really know, we didn't know what we were doing. And so this year we have a little bit more of a better handle on things, and I needed to take things off, or take that time off at work. And at this stage of the game, I felt much more confident about what I was talking about. And so I believe it was Passover, and taking those days off and what I was doing for that. And the girl I was sitting next to had planned to put an Easter basket up with eggs and whatnot. And
Oh man.
and so when she brought that up, I didn't say anything, but it was very shortly after we were talking about it. And I don't know if she asked, I can't really remember exactly, but I had told her what we were doing for Passover. And I said how that, we were going to have a lamb dinner and we were going to go to assembly, and this was a high day, the high day, it was a Sabbath where I can't work and taking it off. And so we were talking about the way that the calendar fell was like in the middle of the week. And she was like, she was really interested and open to what I was saying. And she said, why don't they teach this in church? And I didn't say anything because I know why they don't, but I was like, yeah, it's really interesting, And she was like, yeah, it really is. And so once I knew she was receptive, I've kind of talked more and more. And she's been really wonderful. And she's going through a hard time right now, so please pray for her. I won't mention her name, but I can see moving a little bit there. And I actually invited her to come when we have tabernacles. I said, I'd love for you to bring your kids and you can come, and it's just a really, really nice time. So pray for her that she would come and see what there is and what it could be for her. And so yeah, I'm becoming more bold as time comes on. I'm coming out of that depressive state. I think a lot of my TikToks, I think even early on, maybe even to the middle, I think I was coming through the anger stage.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to be
You're like, I've been
softer.
tricked this whole time. I've been had. They've been hiding this from me. Yeah. I've been there.
So being more happy and grateful, which I am, and I'm feeling the joy is coming. The joy is coming in the morning, right? Like it's
Right.
morning. So I'm really excited about the future and what Yah has in store for us. And as far as the fall feasts come, I'm really excited about those.
Yeah, that's exciting, and it looks like our audio is doing better. I think you can
Okay.
try turning your camera back on.
Okay,
We'll see
let's
if it
see.
does better. So,
Hey,
so
all
it
right.
seemed like somehow it got better. Maybe the topic changed or something.
Oh,
Well, it
yeah.
is
We're not
prime
talking about the
time.
cross.
So
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point. When you walk away from traditional church, there is this. You go through the stages of grief because
Yes.
something has been lost, and
Yes.
you do go through a period of depression. And
Very much.
for me, I had more depression than anger, but it's because I was sad about this whole life that I had lived and built with my kids and my wife and everybody. It just was gone. And
Yes.
almost overnight, when people really figure out, whoa, you are weird, then they're like done.
Right.
You come into church and they're hurrying the children along and they, okay, run quickly, walk past this guy, don't make eye contact, don't talk to him, whatever, and then you're just like,
Right.
what am I doing here?
Well, an interesting part of me was that like when you're talking about Torah terrorism, fighting with Torah keepers was my very special ministry. So when I switched sides, it
Oh,
was
really?
yeah.
it was incredible.
Hmm.
So
Well, and I kind of have this theory, in today's modern age, we probably are supposed to be more like Paul, and have that understanding. Paul had such a deep understanding of Torah and what Yeshua did on the cross, and he's often misunderstood,
mhm.
but I think that's kind of more of the model we should be today, because we a lot of us have the church background, and we understand.
Yes.
The New Testament, we learned that before we learned anything else mostly.
Yes.
And now we're coming back to Torah and we're going, oh, that's where that came from.
Yes.
And all this stuff you start connecting dots. And I think that's why Paul is so powerful, is because he connected all the dots and he
Yes.
saw all of it and how it's meshed together. And it wasn't, there wasn't contradictions. It just all
No.
fit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, but that's a great to hear about your journey and about kind of where you've been. Jake, was there anything else?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to kind of full circle, I guess. But when you
Oh,
mentioned,
and we're going to
oh,
pray for
go
your
ahead.
friend. So in our
That's right.
fellowship,
Oh, yes, yes, pray
we'll
for my
pray for your
friend.
friend, and that's exciting. I think that's one of the reasons I like doing this is because it helps us connect to other people. Because the beautiful thing is when we are assembled on Shabbat.
Mm.
We are joining millions of people around the world, and we are very blessed to be in the states where we're not under persecution,
Yes,
and there are people who do this under duress and secretly, and but we were very grateful for being free like we are. But there are millions of people around the world doing the exact same thing, having the same arguments, and
yes.
trying to figure out what did he mean last week about the goat and the don't boil the kid in the mother's milk.
Yeah.
It seems
Right.
like that's a conversation that perpetually goes on. I think this year it didn't come up only because we weren't together, because this week our fellowship, we were on different places, but yeah, usually
And I think
that
we
kind of
probably
stuff.
argued it out the last couple of times. So
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's what's so powerful, and what you see so missing in the Christian world is, look at any given Sunday, and every church in your town has a different topic, has
Yeah,
a different thing they're doing,
absolutely.
and maybe not even in the same zip code. They're all over the place, and we have this piece of unity that's
Yes,
powerful, and
very much.
I don't even think we understand how powerful it is in the spiritual realm. But if you're listening to this, be encouraged by
Mm.
hearing other believers talk and about this journey and this walk, and know that you're not alone. There are people from Texas to Michigan that do this,
Yes,
and
very much. Yes.
reach out to us, if to Joy or ourselves, if you're trying to figure out, where do you go. And so we mentioned it, but there's a great fellowship finder called on Psalm 119 Ministries,
Mhm.
and you can that could be very useful if you're trying to figure out, how do I get in contact with people. That'd be a good place to start. So anyway,
Yes.
didn't mean to rabbit
yeah,
trail.
no, no problem. This is a show of rabbit trails. So, um, but yeah, just what I was gonna say was, oh yeah. So early on, you had mentioned when you were in church and being uncomfortable with them saying Jesus. I had the same experience because I was going to a Bible study at work during lunchtime,
Oh,
and I found myself going, "Oh man, I don't. I'm uncomfortable with them saying Jesus all the time, and once in a while it'd come around to me to pray, and I'm like, so I kind of had to in the middle of, oh, in your son's name, that kind of game.
yeah.
And then I was like, forget that. If I'm gonna have to be uncomfortable, they can be uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
I just started saying Yeshua, and so it's
Yeah.
it's an icebreaker anyway, if nothing
Yeah.
else. So,
Yes. Yes.
but yeah, I could when you mentioned that, I could connect with it. So I thought that was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. It is really hard. People don't understand it. They really struggle. I mean, I could go on and talk a whole lot more about my dad, but yes, my dad is very, very strong evangelical Christian, and just if I mean, just the name of Jesus is everything. And oh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, it's a tough one for a lot of people.
It's a tough
So
one, but also, like we talked about before, we don't break our relationships because of that.
right, right. No,
Um,
absolutely not. It's
and you have to be careful, for
yes.
sure. But I know that there are people who just like, I've got to do this. I got to be right. I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
may not end well for you.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing, and but definitely changes relationships like that. If you have relationships with close friends, most of those relationships for us disappeared, but
Yes.
family relationships stay because they're
Yes.
family and you're going to see them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it just kind of changed the things we talk about.
it
Unfortunately, I
it
don't
does.
stay up and have 3 o'clock in the morning discussions, maybe where I would do that before. And now they're a little afraid maybe to have that kind of discussion because I don't really know where it's going to go. And,
Right.
Right.
and that's fine, but it just kind of changes the level of relationship but it can still be there and it can still be good.
Yeah,
Right.
So,
for sure. Yes.
but
Yeah,
anyway.
especially when you had mentioned, being in such a small church family and leaving that,
Yeah.
you're probably pretty close to those families since it's so small. And
Yes. There's I think there's a lot of anger on their part with me leaving. They just I'm sure I could have handled it a lot better, but I was in such a really low place, with everything that was going on in my life, and I couldn't I couldn't talk without sobbing. And so it had to be like written communication. It just did not go well at all. So there's a lot of hurt, I think, on both sides, and it hasn't been mended yet, but
Well,
maybe it will.
yeah, it probably will be. I had a similar experience. I was a deacon in church and taught classes, and I kind of argued and fought with the local preacher man, and we had words, and I was really close to his kids, and
Mm.
years later, I came full circle, and y'all put me on his doorstep doing something else,
Mm.
and knocked on the door, and I didn't even know it was him, and started talking to him, and we mended. We had a great
Oh,
conversation. So,
hallelujah.
yeah. So, that was a great thing, and that when the time is right, I think it'll happen. So,
Okay.
um,
Yes.
and y'all can heal that, and at least help you not end up on a bad note. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think anyone listening to this, if you're new to Torah and and maybe you're experiencing this, go study the passage where Yeshua talks about new wineskin,
Mm.
because that's exactly what this is. And I never understood that passage until after going through this. And then I'm like, okay, that is the new wineskin. You have to change all this stuff. The new wineskin to me was a metaphor of my brain or my structures that I had built to contain all of this stuff, and I basically had to throw all that away and get the new wine and
Yes.
reformat myself to hold that new
Yes.
teaching. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get that.
right.
Yeah.
But I think that's what he's talking about is, for me,
It's
that's
it's
what it
almost
meant.
like being born again or something.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. It's exactly like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a transformed mind.
yeah.
Mhm. Yes. I thought I knew a
Well,
lot of
Joy,
things, but I don't.
yeah, yeah. And then the more you do this, the more you go, I
Yeah.
don't know anything.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
So,
very
and
true.
anybody that's walking around and says that they know everything, I'm usually like, I don't think you
Nope.
do. So, well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything else you'd like to say before
Yeah.
we
Point people
sign
to
out?
your social accounts so they can look into you and find your posts.
Sure. I'd like to first thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Um, Anybody can find me on my blog, Afflicted for Messiah at WordPress. I'm Sasa Pater on Twitter. I have a Facebook page in Ingham County. I'm just on Facebook, Joy Brock, and then I usually try and send an invite to new friends. So that, and of course, my TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I found if I just put Joy Brock TikTok, it was pretty easy to find. So
Okay, good
Yeah.
deal.
And congratulations. You're doing quite well there.
Thank you so
Early.
much.
So I don't even know where that's playing, Jay.
that's
I don't even see it.
that's okay.
Well,
That's how it all ends in a blaze of glory.
that's right. That's right. Well, this is the end of our conversation with Joy Brock, and we just hope that you guys will go look her up, that you will share this content with someone that might be listening, that Joy could be a blessing. With a name like Joy, you can't hardly go wrong.
Right.
Something good's going to happen there. So
Exactly.
your parents did a kind thing there for sure. That's a good name. So
Yeah.
Thank
So we just hope if you've listened to this that you're blessed by the conversation.
yeah, and follow her, like her content, and
do the same for Sabbath Lounge also.
Yeah, we do the same thing for Sabbath Lounge. We ask you to do that, and we just ask you to stay tuned, and we'll have other people that we're talking to. So we're
Right.
kind of in a season of talking to people, and
Yep.
we're going to do this more. So, Joy, we're going to sign off, but we'll stay on the line with you for just a second and make sure everything gets recorded. So this is Matt
And Jake
signing out. Thank you for being with Sabbath Lounge today.